The Japanese first began immigrating to the U.S. in 1868. This was the Meiji Restoration period, which was when Japan was forced to open up to the rest of the world, ending its period of isolation. From 1885 to 1894, the Japanese government initiated a program sending Japanese people to work on Hawaiian sugarcane and pineapple plantations and California produce farms. An economic pull factor to the U.S. was the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882, causing a labor shortage in America. Japanese immigrants were sought to replace the Chinese immigrants that were now excluded.
Some other economic pull factors were better wages and more jobs. Japanese immigrated to the west coast of the United States because of economic opportunity. The majority of these immigrants were men serving higher incomes.
There were jobs to be found in mining, railroads, and farming throughout the Pacific Northwest. During the early 1900s, the Japanese would typically alternate their work on farms and railroads. Many hoped they would be able to eventually own their own farms as they had in Japan to gain more autonomy. Unfortunately for the Japanese workers, much of the racial discrimination once directed to the Chinese was now felt by the Japanese, as West Coast Americans became envious of the hard-working Japanese people's success. This led to the Gentlemen's Agreement between Japan and the United States in 1907, which was designed to limit the number of laborers immigrating from Japan. This prompted a change in the demographics of Japanese migrants. Now Japanese bachelors attempted to start families. Thus, mainly females began immigrating from Japan to become wives and brides for the male immigrants already in the United States. Many Japanese immigrants and Japanese Americans were relocated to internment camps under Executive Order 9066 during World War II. The War Brides Act of 1945 was amended in 1947 to allow Asian spouses and children of American soldiers to enter the United States, including the Japanese.
So the Japanese settled on the west coast rather than the east coast, since there was job opportunities for them as farmers on the west coast, and also because of the Chinese settlements on parts of the west coast. The west coast is also a lot closer to them than the east coast is, so it was easier for them to travel a shorter distance. So as you can see here, the Japanese settled around the existing Chinatown in San Jose. The Japanese relocation camps were also placed or located a lot on the western coast. As you can see on the map here, they're all like the dark little rectangles.
Originally, in the early 20th century, second-generation Japanese Nisei only married fellow Japanese due to racial discrimination that deterred interracial marriage. However, from the late 20th century onward, intermarriage between Japanese and other races of Americans increased dramatically, resulting in cultural syncretism, and 1/3 of children of Japanese descent being from interracial unions.
I went to school in 1970, and I think it was over 50% of the Japanese American females were marrying non-Japanese American men. They married outside, and I think there's only 36 since then, so there's a high rate of interethnic and interracial marriages. I think as people have moved out of the community and into more professions, when the Japanese first came in, they could only work on their farms. They could only pick crops. They were allowed to do it. When they came back after World War II, a lot of people went back and did gardening, even though they didn't know how to be gardeners because it was the only thing that was open to them. I think that's changed. It's changing more, so I think there are different opportunities and people have gone to college.
Many young Japanese Americans became very interested in baseball. They were able to form their own leagues and teams. As for the Japanese influence on America in sports, the Japanese have brought over sumo wrestling from Japan.